being able to handle uncertain environments, changing landscapes, things changing very quickly, not just changing, but changing quickly, and still think clearly, make good decisions, read the information properly, recognize patterns, and as we talked about at the very beginning, deliver on demand, right? Really perform in the moment of performance, perform when it's needed. And so being able to build the capacity needed to handle a stressful environment, that's what comes up, I would say, in the first 10 or 15 minutes of every discovery conversation we have. And that's typically where we start with every client in terms of a team setting, is emotional regulation, resilience, and stress management.
Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Revolutionize, Alex Kremer. What is up, y'all? Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast. This is your host, Alex Kremer. And as always, we have an incredible show here for you today. I am here with the incredible Mr. Matt Comand to talk about how do we actually start impacting these corporations, these leaders, these sales teams to be performing at an extremely high level. So first off, I would just love to welcome the incredibly good-looking Matt Comand. Matt, what's up, man? Good to see you.
Hey, Alex. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm grateful. You know, it's funny when we had the conversation about what we're going to talk about, when you started talking about like, hey, there's just an opportunity to be improving how these corporations, these executives and sales teams operate. I was like, man, I could jam out on this for like 48 years. So we're going to try to condense it here to not be 48 years, I guess you could say, but I'm excited to get into this. So Matt, just to give a little bit of a background on you, you are the founder and the director of performance at Emergent. Emergent, you're working with high performance coaching agencies. Excuse me. Let me start that. Matt, just a background on you. You are the founder and director of performance at Emergent. Emergent, you're a high performance coaching agency. You're focused on creating and you're implementing in-house high performance coaching programs for executives, for teams and organizations. And some fun facts about you that I think is just good for people to know. You have a master's in sports and performance psychology. You have about a decade worth of working with high performance in athletics as well as in corporate settings. And another really cool thing is you're a hockey coach. So it's just like kind of, you get a real life experience of bringing all this stuff to the world.
Yeah. And I was a professor of sports psych as well for a few years at a college here in Toronto. So the academic piece, the teaching, the coaching, the consulting. So I've been really lucky to have a lot of different experiences where I can apply some of this work and then also just see performers in their natural habitat, so to speak, and see what are common barriers, common traits of high performers and things like that. So yeah, I've been lucky to see it from all angles.
You know, I think there's such a common trend of what are we doing within sports to just create these incredibly, powerful people who can perform under pressure, under stress. And I love how you are bringing what we're doing in sports to corporate settings because there's a lot of high pressure and stress within, I know what we're doing there. So I'd actually love to just kind of start there of, when we think about sports and we think about corporations, what have you been seeing about the overlap between the two and how are you to work with those?
Yeah, so it's a great question and lots of overlap. So first and foremost, as you mentioned, just the pressure to perform consistently can be really externalized, right? From coaches or from bosses, from parents as teenagers are growing up and things like that, from leaders. And so being able to take what you know and display it on demand. Right, that really is performance. Where there's you and I could get on a sales call, let's say, and there's no second chances. Right, the Euros are going on right now, a lot of penalty kicks and things like that. If I miss a kick, I can't say to the game, "Hey, pause. Can I try that again?" Right. So you're displaying your knowledge, your skills on demand in a high consequence environment. So that is the biggest overlap between sports and corporate settings. I mean, on a macro level, and then on an individual level, it's all the psychological things that come up, right? We all have confidence issues at times. We all have self-doubt. We all have imposter syndrome, performance anxiety. We've all dealt with team dynamics and personality traits for people we mesh with, people we don't, leadership dynamics, right? Operating in a team environment and in a system, things like that. So there's a ton of overlap, and the skills and principles that can help an athlete can absolutely help a sales rep, for example, a CS rep, a HR rep, whatever the wherever people work. And certainly on the leadership side, working with coaches and then working with managers, sales leaders, founders, how do you create an environment where people are at their best, right? How do you create an environment that accelerates learning and accelerates performance? That to me is one of the most interesting things.
Yeah, I see such a parallel between the two. In corporations, it's so often where executives or leaders are demanding of the people who are working under them. And when someone is demanding or has really high expectations of you, it's very easy to crumble. And it's very easy to say like, I don't know. And you try to become somebody you're not, or you try to put on this mask to be a performer. And it really takes you away from tapping into, I guess you call it, what, a flow state of just like, hey, I'm just doing really well. So when you talked about like creating an environment that actually allows people to be performing at a high level, how do you actually go about even doing that?
Yeah, another great question. So for me, in terms of a leadership perspective, it starts with language. And I know everybody talks about being a great communicator, right? Every job posting you'll ever see must be a great communicator, must possess excellent communication skills. And those things are there for a reason. And so I've really tried to learn about what that actually means. What is it to be a great communicator? And so how we structure our language, specifically around tough conversations, right? Your performance is not meeting the expectations, not meeting the standard. And so there's a gap between what you're doing and what we expect. And so when that happens, how a leader structures their language in a way that that does not degrade the relationship, does not erode trust. That's really difficult, right? So a few things leaders can do in instances like that is, number one, try to balance conviction and empathy, right? So on the conviction side, hey, we have high expectations here. We have high standards. We hired you for a reason. We believe in you. This is what we need to do. But there's a gap here, right? And then we need to address it, and we're going to support you. And then on the empathy side, on the other end of the spectrum, it's more of the psychological safety. We're here to develop you. Again, we've hired you because we believe in you. Here are some resources. And so being able to balance those things is really tough for a leader. But I think that's, if we were to boil down what makes a great leader, and of course there's so much nuance and complexity there, but if you're able to balance conviction and empathy, I think you're probably going to be on the right side of the curve for sure.
Conviction and empathy. When you say conviction, what do you mean by that? I mean, the way that I think about conviction, it's, do you have passion? Do you actually mean what you say? It's like, are you able to, passion is pass I on. Are you able to like pass the energy that you feel onto somebody else's? Would you define conviction in that similar type of way?
I could. I mean, certainly passion. I don't know. I'd probably have to think on that a little bit, just because I think there is a sense of presence needed, of course, and conviction to help gather others and lead into a direction in our world mostly of uncertainty. Right, we're bringing a team, and the environment, the landscape is uncertain, lots of variables, lots of changing things quickly, and so we might not know exactly what's going to come around the bend, and to be able to lead a team that way, you do need that sense of maybe conviction or passion as you're speaking about it. The way I viewed it in the past is more around just being able to set a standard and stick to it. And whether it's the systems in place, the processes in place, what sort of behavior and language is acceptable and what's not, and being able to communicate that again in a way that does not erode trust. Does not degrade the person, gets them walking out of the office with a renewed sense of purpose, maybe. And it's not about being nice all the time. Sometimes there are difficult conversations, but for me, it's holding that standard, holding what's acceptable.
And I'm assuming what needs to happen first is the leadership team actually needs to set what the standards and the values are.
Yes. Yeah, that's that is a good point. And trying to understand exactly what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and why it's important. And I think that last piece of why is this important, a lot of leadership teams might miss that step. And we all know what we want to do. We all know our goals and our quotas and revenue goals and all that kind of thing. But why is this important? Why are we doing this? Is can be a very open-ended question, of course, almost an existential question, but I think one that's important to address. So, setting the standard, understanding, our culture, if we want to use that word, and knowing what's acceptable is really important.
Mm-hmm. I just know from being at corporations for a while and even, what I'm doing now, there's this feeling of take action, go, create. Like there's no time to slow down and actually really ask ourselves, hey, so why are we doing this? Like, what's the standard that we're doing this at? What are the key expectations? But what I love that you're speaking to is like, there's a required, hey, you first need to set kind of the tone of like, hey, we're not ready to just go yet. We need to make sure that when it comes to driving this team in a certain type of way, that we're aware of that. And you work with a lot of executives and teams on actually going about developing what their vision is. You go about developing what the values are with them. What are you typically seeing within organizations about why is that hard to do? Or what are the typical struggles when an organization gets together and is driving towards just, building a company? Why is it hard to have that vision or have those values and kind of come back to it over and over again?
One thing I've seen is a lot of the clients I've worked with are startups, early stage, maybe 10, 15 people, all the way up to a couple hundred people. And I think as companies grow, it's very difficult to communicate that culture. And now you have, let's say 100 different personalities coming in and things and getting everybody aligned with those values. So I think just the complexity of the human condition with 100 people or 200 people is just difficult to get everybody on board and to communicate that consistently. But that's part of the job as a leader, right? Is to ensure that everybody understands why we're doing what we're doing, why we're here. It's not to make money. Yes, that is, of course, a financial reality of every business, but hopefully the company exists for some sort of greater purpose, right? And I think there, like you said, we could talk for 48 hours about all this kind of stuff, but in terms of what motivates people, what people are committed to, having a sense of greater purpose and contributing to that purpose, contributing to your team is something that is very motivating. It's not very abrasive, or we're not going to see it in movies. We see the pregame speech, or we see the boss try to inspire people in the office and things like that. That's not typically how it goes. It's much more kind of understated, but much more sustainable, right? And that's what we really want to build. So in terms of how and why it's difficult, like I said, the size of the company and the growth of the company, and it's not as urgent as other things, right? If I'm a CEO or if I'm a founder or a head of revenue and things are growing and I've got my to-do list, I've got my meetings, I've got everything going on, I've got a forecast, I've got strategy planning, I have so much on my plate that is far more urgent. And if I don't, speak with my reps about how are they living the company's values today, nothing bad is going to happen today, right? Over time, you might get less loyal employees, less engaged employees. Maybe there's a sense of employees being adrift after a while, not really knowing why they're doing what they're doing. But in terms of urgency, it's not quite there. And so I think understanding the balance between what's important and what's urgent and allocating our time effectively, or accordingly, I should say. So that's something that we've seen quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I feel that deeply. When a seller, I mean, this is what has happened to me multiple times, is when a leader, whether me being a leader or other people being the leader, is feeling a certain sense of stress, feeling a certain sense of anxiety, or is not actually adhering to the principles or the values with which the company is wanting, it just creates this vibration throughout the organization that everybody starts to feel it too. It's like, um, I still remember there was one time at like the very end of Q4 within our sales team, and I was feeling super stressed and anxious. And when it came to one of my team meetings, I looked around, I'm like, man, why is everybody so stressed and anxious, just like me? And I was like, you know what? It's because I am, and everybody here is working for me. And so, like, kind of just like the requirement to actually slow down and live the values that you're speaking to, it's yes, important. Like, everybody wants purpose. I think more than ever too. There's two things people are wanting more than ever. People want purpose / meaning, and people want a sense of community. And it's a great saying, hey, what's the purpose of this? Why are we doing this? What's the greater thing? But then when it actually comes to the day to day, whether it be the CEO or the sales leaders or anybody, it's like, cool, how's the revenue looking? What's in our pipeline right here? Have you done your activities? We're not driving towards the actions that we're actually trying to do. And it's easy to get lost in just the process.
100%. And these things aren't either or, right? They're both extremely important. One, like I said, probably has more urgency than the other. And as I was speaking to earlier, the ability to communicate what's necessary and our goals, our processes, and get people excited about that is part of the art of leadership. I would say maybe not the science. Maybe it is the science too, but maybe more so the art. Getting people to galvanizing people to rally around a purpose and understand what it takes to get there. And that's where maybe commitment comes in, and then energy and things like that. So, yeah, it is a delicate balance. It's why I think a lot of revenue leaders and founders are just so stressed, burnt out, overwhelmed. A lot of them, the companies don't make it in the end. And so there's just so many other things going on, not to mention they might have a family, they might have a partner, they might, it's not just, they're not just the founder. They're a person with other roles in their lives that they have to balance. And so it's definitely, there's a lot going on.
Mm. Well, I don't think there's any surprise that, corporations are changing quite a bit right now. We're in a very unique, whether you want to call it an inflection point, whether you want to call it a renaissance right now, where, what used to hit, so to speak, in 2018 is not quite having the same, sizzle anymore. And people are wanting something new. People and employees are demanding something more from their corporations, especially as everybody's working from home and feeling a greater sense of isolation. And, people's identities are not tied as much to their W-2, right? Side gigs are on the rise. AI is taking jobs. Crypto is changing how we actually, exchange money and value. So it's just like, as all of this stuff is changing, I guess I'd love just to hear from your perspective is, what is actually being required now of these corporations to succeed moving forward?
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely been a shift in the last 4 or 5 years that I've noticed anyway, of employers understanding the comprehensive nature of performance and maybe the added necessity of wellness in there. And wellness, of course, is a wide spectrum, all the way from mental health to performance and things like that, but just understanding the comprehensive nature of performance. And so, it's been, sorry, I kind of might need to edit this part. What was I just wanted to agree with what you were saying. And then the second part of
what is required of companies or corporations to actually continue to succeed?
Yeah, great question. So, sorry, I've said that a couple of times. Now I'm getting in my thing here a little bit too, but
I just want to highlight you're crushing. I'm loving the stuff that you're putting down. So
yeah, great. Thank you. So I think there's been a shift, like I said, of understanding the comprehensive nature of performance and what that means, the added necessity of wellness and that spectrum, of course, But the things that come up the most in our work lately are stress management, emotion regulation, resilience, right? And so I think people are being tasked with doing more with less time and less resources. The pressure's on. The market hasn't been great the last couple of years, right? Especially in the sales industry, so in tech sales. And so being able to, you mentioned this vibration that you were experiencing, being able to handle uncertain environments, changing landscapes, things changing very quickly, not just changing, but changing quickly, and still think clearly, make good decisions, read the information properly, recognize patterns, and as we talked about at the very beginning, deliver on demand, right? Really perform in the moment of performance, perform when it's needed. And so being able to build the capacity needed to handle a stressful
Mm.
environment. That's what comes up, I would say, in the first 10 or 15 minutes of every discovery conversation we have. And that's typically where we start with every client in terms of a team setting, is emotional regulation, resilience, and stress management.
Mm. So I remember right when COVID started, our CEO hired on this one guy to come talk about mental health, and uh, I can't even remember what we ended up doing, but he talked about the importance of meditation. We'd have these like, it was almost felt like check the box things that make people feel, oh, my company's doing something to mentally support me. Oh, they have a speaker coming in to talk about the importance of breathing. Yes, extremely valuable, but when it came to actually implementing these things, there was still this like stress and anxiousness that was felt in meetings with your boss and all hands or whatever it might be. And so when it comes to actually making changes, when you talk about stress and mental health and resilience, right there, it's like, is the onus on the leadership to be coming from that place themselves? Is it on just the structures and the processes they have? Like, hey guys, after 5 o'clock, no emails, for example, or hey, Fridays are mental health days. So, or whatever it might be. It's like, if we're actually trying to make this change within corporations that make people feel safer and healthier and mentally more resilient and actually wanting to be there, is it on the executives or is it on something else that I don't even know about right now?
I would say it's on both, right? It is on the executives to create an environment where people are pushed, but pushed in the right way. And I say this, with basically every client I speak with, every leader, it's like we have a responsibility to impact somebody's life. People come to work, or maybe they log in now, work virtually, of course, but people are at work 40, 50, maybe more, 60 hours a week for years. And with that, we have, like I said, a tremendous responsibility to create an environment that help people grow. That's not always going to be comfortable. It's not always going to be fun and nice and Friday afternoons and beers and ping pong and all that. It's not that at all, right? But if we're doing the opposite, and sometimes it's not intentional, sometimes it is. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've had maybe bosses like that in the past, but I'm sure it's not intentional, where the environment does become very stress enhancing, not very focused on recovery and skills and growth and things like that, very kind of cutthroat. And that can happen almost by accident, just because we're not as deliberate as we need to be in creating the other type of environment that we're talking about, right? So it's on the executives. I would also say we all have a responsibility to be our best selves as well. Some people have greater capacity. If you're right out of school and you're young and no partner, no kids, you might have more time on your hands, something like that. If you've got young kids or a family or parents or something, everyone has different variables in their life, of course. But we can all continue to keep learning and take that responsibility for ourselves and take responsibility for our own development and take ownership of that. And one of my favorite definitions of resilience I've ever heard is seeking growth even when the conditions do not support it. And that to me, that I heard that a couple of years ago, and it just stuck right out, right. And that to me is, if you are in an environment that doesn't support growth or that's not really great, on one hand, maybe you do examine, is this the right environment for me long term? And of course, that's a valid question sometimes. But can you still seek growth and reframe things and use adversity to keep learning, to seek that growth even when the conditions aren't supporting it?
That is an amazing statement right there. Seeking growth even when the environment isn't actually providing that. And I think that's kind of the truth of the matter. When I think of, there's always two sides of the coin that I've always struggled with, or just like kind of the question that I've been asking myself for many years is like, how does one both be working towards something, right? Working towards a vision or something in the future, while also still remaining in the present. It's like it's a conundrum right there. It's like, cool, how do I achieve at an extremely high level? How do I make a shit ton of money? How do I, crush my quota if I'm a sales rep or a sales leader or whatever I'm trying to do, while also feeling spaciousness, while also feeling joy, feeling fulfillment, feeling purpose, whatever that might be. And what I've found, and it's just kind of, doubling down on what you're saying, that sacred third between those two, right? How to both achieve while also feeling grounded and in the present moment, is to fall in love with learning how to master your craft. And your craft in its core is you. It's just like becoming more you. And sure, part of you is maybe a sales rep or a leader or whatever it might be. But it's like, are you simply falling in love with learning how to master the craft of you? And resilience, just like you said, it's like, hey, even if the conditions don't feel super abundant in like, oh man, I'm feeling so supported and everything like that, it's just like, man, like my job here is to grow. That's my number one thing. And as long as I'm continuing to focus on that, even if I get the no's, even if I fail, it's, man, what a wonderful opportunity for me to grow. But that's not an easy thing to continue going forward with that.
No, and definitely not an easy thing to continue. And as we've talked about, when we are sitting at home, maybe on a Sunday evening or in the morning, and it's quiet, we can think about these big picture things. But then we all have bills to pay too, right? We are driven to make money and provide for ourselves, provide for our family, have a certain lifestyle that we enjoy, right? And so it is this balance of, I want or need, some people need to achieve. And then also I want to keep growing and be present, be happy where I am. Maybe one day I do want to be a CRO or start my own company, and that's my long-term goal. But how do I be as present as I can right now? And I think, like you said, diving into the craft itself, mastering the craft, detaching yourself from the outcome, as counterintuitive as that might be or might sound. There's a certain freedom, I think, that comes with that, and almost surrendering to the process. I think is something that we can all do more of. Of course, results are important, especially in sales, and there's financial realities, as we said. But being able to surrender yourself to the process, I think, is powerful.
One of the things that I remember you talked about in a previous conversation, you talked about the continual need to redefine what we're doing, redefine what we're doing, and redefine what our values, redefine what our vision is, redefine what am I learning right now. And I'd actually just love for you to expand a little bit when you say continually redefine. Share a little about that.
Yeah, I would say the word need is interesting. I would say more of an opportunity to redefine, and that's when I work with people or teams, that's something I try to say, we're going to help you redefine what your best is, and redefine. Can you be more in contact with who you really are, your authentic self, your personal values, things like that, your deeper purpose. And so I think that as we continue to seek those things and learn more about ourselves, learn more about our relationship with success, our relationship with failure or adversity, our relationship with others, the more that we can continue to learn about ourselves, the more we'll be able to handle the environments that we're thrown in. You were speaking earlier about achieving, and I think that can be a dangerous game sometimes too. One thing that I talk about with confidence, that's another thing that comes up all the time. Negative self-talk, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, all these terms that come up. We talk about confidence, and most definitions of confidence are something like the belief in your ability to complete a certain task, right? The belief in your ability to achieve something or obtain something. I think that's a pretty narrow definition, probably outdated, not applicable to today's world. And so we try to move away from achieving and more towards adapting, right? And that's what we talk about, redefining ourselves. Can we adapt the way that we approach a problem? Can we learn something new? Can we, I've worked with sales reps who maybe they have a new territory that they're dealing with for the first time, or a new ICP that they're dealing with for the first time. A new product that has come out that they have to start selling, a new industry if they've switched jobs, something like that. And so there's a lot of hesitation and stress about that, fear about that. Am I going to be able to do this? And so it's not about achieving, it's about adapting. Can I adapt to whatever the landscape throws at me? And this way, no matter what it throws at you, you will learn eventually, right? It might be slow, it might not feel like a ton of progress at first, but then building on it, it compounds, and we kind of go from there. So moving away from focusing on achieving and moving towards adapting, I think, is a much more applicable, sustainable perspective on confidence and on performance in general.
Yeah, I like that. There was that adapting reminds me of I think it was a Google executive talked about the rate of change is now going so quickly that it's now beyond the capacity that humans have to keep up with it. And it's like, okay, so what is what are we going to do as things are changing so much? And it's like, the goal should no longer be just achieving, because once you achieve something, then it's in the past, or it's irrelevant.
Yeah. And one thing that stories I tell sometimes too is like, whatever goal you're pursuing, athletic, financial, corporate, professional, whatever goal that you're pursuing, when the opportunity comes to kind of achieve that goal, very rarely, in my experience anyway, very rarely is that goal kind of showing up, the opportunity to achieve the goal showing up in the exact same way that you prepared for it, right? Maybe there's more people in the boardroom. Maybe it's a new client, a new product being demonstrated. Whatever happens, like unexpected stuff comes up all the time. And so if we prepare a certain way and then the opportunity to achieve the goal is not that exact same way, then our stress skyrockets, right? And so we're so focused on, I need to get this done, I have to do this, versus approaching it with a curious mind and a mind towards adapting and learning. And again, I know in the heat of the moment that's difficult, but if we can truly garner that kind of mindset, I think it's, like I keep saying, it's much more sustainable.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier said than done. And learning how to be, treating it all as a practice. It's just like, this is going to be a little esoteric here, but, I part of one of my beliefs is multiple lives. And it's a little bit self-serving around believing in multiple lives, is because it's like, man, if I only got this lifetime to figure out everything I'm trying to figure out, like I'm overwhelmed and I'm failing miserably. But when it's like, you know what, this lifetime is simply just a little bit of a blip right now on a larger scale of things. Okay, I'm just here to learn, and I'm just preparing my soul for whatever is next in my journey. So, it just kind of gives me a little bit like a little solace, I guess you'd say. It's like, it's got to be okay. Just learn.
Yeah, we of course in our day-to-day we can get overwhelmed. We've got 100 tabs open, we've got emails, we've got texts and social media and all these different things, our goals, our to-do lists. But if we can take a step back, one thing I talk about with clients a lot too is just zooming out. Can we just zoom out for a minute and is this going to be a problem a month from now, a year from now, right? What kind of person do we want to be? What are the values or principles we want to live by? And can we just zoom out from from this for a moment and see things from a different perspective. Maybe you're zooming out, existentially and centuries wise. We like to zoom out, just like a year or two maybe. But yeah, I think it's a great tool to use.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. Well, Matt, I want to just ask you one more final question here. And I did not tell you that I was going to ask this question, but I just want to acknowledge you first, man. Just, the work that you are doing with organizations and cultures and corporations, executives and teams, so needed right now. And I love your background of being able to bring what is happening in the sports world to these corporations, because we need this. We need high performance across everything, especially as things are changing. So thanks for just the work that you are doing on yourself and the work that you are bringing to the world, my friend.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm infinitely interested and curious about humans and teams and high performance and what that really means and the changing definition of high performance. So I could talk about this stuff forever, but yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right, here's my last question. This is a question I always ask at the very end of each podcast. This show is called the Rising Leader Podcast. My question for you is, what do you view as the rising leader?
The word modern is coming to mind. And I think what that might mean might go back to what we talked about earlier about understanding the need for humility, vulnerability, empathy, as well as conviction, right? If we're too far on the vulnerability, humility, empathy side, and we don't drive standards, we don't communicate goals and expectations, we don't hold people to that standard, then performance suffers, right? Apathy might even set in after a while. Nobody's really getting their job done. Some people are working hard, some people aren't. Not the kind of team we want to have. And then, of course, on the flip side, which I think is much more common, is leaders are much more on the conviction side, right? The confidence side. I'm the leader, and listen to me. I'm going to lead us through, and they kind of forget about the empathy and vulnerability, humility side. And so, being able to really strike that balance would be, I think, what a modern leader does, what a rising leader does. For me, a lot of times too, leadership is behavior based. Of course, there's frameworks and mindsets and perspectives that we need to have as leaders, but other people can't know what you're thinking or your mindset. You can try to communicate that to them, but for me, leadership is behavior based and language based, and everybody is always watching, and you are always modeling, whether or not you realize it, and whether or not your followers, your team realizes it. I don't think people consciously process, oh, I'm watching my leader do this, so it's okay, or I'm going to do it that way too. Like every team becomes the characteristic of its leader, right? And so there's the subconscious modeling that goes on, and learning and normalizing and giving people, letting people know what's acceptable and things like that. So for me, that true balance of conviction and empathy, and then behavior-based and language-based, and being really deliberate and aware about that. And then I guess maybe the last piece would be self-awareness and doing work, internal work, inward work, whether that's journaling, having a coach, a lot of meditation and mindfulness, speaking with mentors, really understanding who am I as a leader? Who do I want to be? What do I want to represent? How do I want my employees to feel every day? And there are busy times and things like that, of course, end of month, end of quarter, stuff like that. But how do I want them feeling working here? And those questions take time. Those questions are not easy to answer. But I think if we have that framework and that foundation beforehand, the decisions we make when things do get busy and unexpected and there's chaos and uncertainty, at least we have a bit of a map or a compass, if that's the analogy we want to use, versus just trying to chart the course day by day and not knowing really where we want to go.
I love the work on, or what you said about doing the work on yourself first. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Powerful.
Absolutely.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you, my friend. If people want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to do so?
Yeah, Matt at workwithemergent.com would be the best email. Workwithemergent.com is the website, but we're kind of under construction there. Socials are under construction. We kind of have an Emergent 2.0 coming up. So, but Matt at workwithemergent.com would be the best way.
Wonderful. Well, Matt, I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you for spreading your wisdom. And for those who joined, thank you as always. And please make sure you subscribe to this pod for every single week when a new one comes out. We will see you soon. Thanks for listening to the Rising Leader Podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified every time a new episode releases. If you know someone who wants to take their lives and their career to the next level, send them this episode so we can all rise together. For more information, check out alluviance.co. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep letting it flow.